So we talked earlier about blend modes, but we didn't really use them. So we're going to give them a try now. This bedrock right here is a bit too bright and it just really clashes with the rest of the colors in my image. So I'm going to go back to that layer and I'm going to click on it. And directly above that where my blend layers are, I'm just going to start cycling through until I find one that makes it blend much better. And you can see that different ones do different things. This whole section will make whatever it is that I am trying to blend darker. This section will make it lighter. And then this section it's a very interesting section. It adds contrast. It makes dark things darker and light things lighter at the same time. I really like this soft light filter and what it does, or this soft light blend mode. It's blending that color in very nicely and it looks a lot more natural. If I can turn that back to natural, you can see the big difference there. So it's very bright and this just blends it in so beautifully. Now I do want it to look like there's a bit of a shadow. I want it to look like this water is hanging over this bedrock just a little bit. So here's a trick to add a shadow. I'm going to isolate it by clicking on the base and making a selection. So this way when I'm drawing my shadow, that way I know it's going to stay inside of these lines. It's not going to bleed out onto the rest of my image. Now, of course, we want to put it on a new layer. So I'm going to create a new layer. That way, if I don't like it, I can always just toss it. And I want it to come in on top of these two textures. So I'm going to leave it right where it is, right here. So all we have to do is get a B for brush. And I'm going to hit D for default. That brings up my default colors. So B for brush, D for default. And that big fuzzy brush, again, I really like big fuzzy brushes. And I'm just going to run it along the edge of this section right here. But there's a trick that we can do that will make it stay in a straight line. So I'm going to click once right here. And then I'm going to hold shift and click right here. And you can see, oh, look at that. All right, and I'm just going to tap it just a couple times right here to get it into that corner there. Also, I want this corner to be a little bit more defined, and we're going to do that using a different brush in a minute. But right now, this is very, very dark. It's too dark, so I have two options. Remember, we can play with the blend modes or we can back off the opacity a little bit. I'm going to start with the opacity and just drop it back a little bit here. And then we'll check the blend modes here. I think I'm just going to leave with the opacity here. I like this, the way this is looking. And then I'm going to kill my ants by hitting Control D. So, oh, look at that. Now we have some depth here. It looks like this is hanging over. It's looking really good. So before we used some grunge brushes to add a little bit of grunge on the bottom here, but those ink stains are coming from stuff that is sliding kind of down this bedrock. So I'm going to use some more of those grunge brushes. I'm going to hit a new layer just in case I don't like this, and I'm going to move this underneath my shadow layer. And oh my goodness, I'm not naming my my layers again. So we'll call this one bedrock, and we'll call this one sandstone. We'll call this one bedrock shadow, and then we'll call this one bedrock grunge. If you notice, I'm starting to get a lot of layers, and we are just getting started. So I want to do the same thing that I've been doing. I want to isolate that. I want to isolate this bedrock so that it doesn't get all over the rest of my image. So I'm going to go back to my paths palette, hit my base, turn it into a selection. And I've got black ink, but I need to change up my brush. So I'm going to click on my brush tool, and then I'm going to go back to that lovely set of grunge brushes that I had. And I see some nice splats and splatters here. Let's see. Oh, that one's lovely. It's way too big though, so we are going to use the left bracket to bring it down. And we're just going to let that kind of slide on down. Now, cool trick, you can just make it a little bigger and it looks like a completely different brush. How about that? So we're just going to switch out a couple of these different brushes. Make this one a little bit smaller. Whoops, left bracket. There we go. And right here, I really want to make that area, I'm just going to hit it 2 or 3 times because I want that area to look like it's squared off here. So that's kind of cool. We'll do one more. I'll make this a little bit smaller. And just along the edges here. There we go. Now feel free to play around with those brushes until you get the look that you like. And remember, because it's on its own layer, we can also adjust the opacity. So if it's a little too dark or a little too light, you can adjust your blend modes or your opacity until you get it to where you like it. And now we're ready to move on to the next step.